Hello and welcome to the final webinar in the Organic Seed Production webinar series organized by the Organic Seed Alliance and the Multinational Exchange for Sustainable Agriculture. This is your host, Alice Formiga from eOrganic at extension.org. All of the webinars in this series and many other presentations on organic seed production are archived on our website at extension.org as well as on the eOrganic YouTube channel. This presentation will last about 45 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions. We'll be reading as many questions out loud as we can after the presentation is over. So today, we're very happy to welcome Kiki Hubbard of the Organic Seed Alliance. She is the Director of Advocacy and Communications for the Organic Seed Alliance, and she has worked on seed policy issues for over 15 years. She currently leads efforts to promote policies that support organic seed systems, including managing the Organic Seed Alliance's State of Organic Seed project. She's joining us today from Montana. So Kiki, I'm going to hand over the screen control to you now.
And hello to everyone joining today. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to discuss our State of Organic Seed project and focus on some policy updates with you all as stakeholders who are interested in supporting the development of organic seed systems. For those of you who aren't familiar with our State of Organic Seed project, this is an ongoing project of ours at Organic Seed Alliance that monitors the status of organic seed in the U.S. How are we doing to ensure that we're continuing to increase diversity, quality, and integrity of organic seed available to farmers here in the U.S.? It's the only comprehensive assessment that tries to take a deep look at how we're doing in the areas of organic seed research, at our organic seed supply, and in the area of organic seed policy, which again, I'll focus on more here in a few minutes. We're committed to updating this data and recommendations every 5 years to serve as a roadmap for the broader organic community, because it takes broad stakeholder involvement along the entire seed production as well as food production chain to build healthy organic seed systems that are responsive to the diverse and regional needs of organic operations across the U.S. And we're excited that our most recent report, which was just published about a year ago, serves as our first 5-year update so that we're able to compare, for the first time again, how we're doing. We can compare the metrics from our first report in 2011 to our most recent data collected for this most recent report. Just quickly, I want to be clear about 2 overarching goals of our State of Organic Seed project. The first is that we envision an organic food supply built on a foundation of organic seed. Many of you on this call probably know that when the federal organic standards were implemented, the organic seed sector was nearly non-existent. And while in some ways it's still in its infancy, we've made tremendous progress in growing the organic seed supply. And we believe the current exemption to use conventional, by that I mean non-organic, untreated seed, we believe that exemption to use non-organic seed is necessary until we can meet all the different needs of organic operations, until the supply is robust enough to require changes in that way. And as we work toward this goal of increasing organic seed usage, I want to make clear that it's never our intent to promote policies or actions that force growers to use seed that's not appropriate for their farm. Instead, OSA and many of our partners advocate for reasonable and measurable improvements that help us make more progress toward building that robust organic seed supply that again meets all the diverse and regional needs of operations, regardless of their scale, where they're located, what have you. Secondly, we want to advance organic seed to help operations meet a regulatory requirement for sure, but even more important, we believe that the benefits of building organic seed systems is important to the broader health and success of agriculture. This is especially true as we witness 3 of the most historic seed industry mergers in history that threaten to further consolidate and privatize our plant genetic resources. And I believe that as an organic community, we have not only an opportunity, but an obligation to create a path for organic seed that is very distinct from the dominant system controlled by agrochemical interests. And we can create a path that is more decentralized and adheres to the principles that help to found the organic movement to begin with, including the principles of shared benefit and open access. So how are we doing? Our latest data shows that we're making progress in some areas, but not in others. And we came to this conclusion through a number of methods, including a national survey that we conducted of organic crop growers, a survey of organic seed suppliers, as well as the survey of organic certifiers to better understand their perspective and experience with the organic seed requirement. We also conducted, for the second time, an analysis of both public and private research investments in the areas of organic plant breeding and seed research. And then we surveyed the researchers who received this funding over the last 5 years to better understand what their successes were, as well as ongoing needs. And then lastly, we held a number of listening sessions around the country to gather input from stakeholders who were not targeted by the surveys I just mentioned. I'll quickly point out that for those of you who are interested in digging deeper into the data that we collected as well as the analysis, you can find the report at stateoforganicseed.org. It's quite extensive. It's over 100 pages long. And of course, in today's webinar, I'm only going to summarize just a few of the key findings here. So first, what progress have we made? We found that more farmers are choosing to source organic seed compared to data collected, for our first report in 2011. Of the organic crop growers responding to our survey, 27% already use organic seed on all of their acreage. This showed minor improvement compared to our first report, where we found 20% of the growers at that time were using all organic seed. And I think importantly, more than a third of farmers responding to our survey also said that over the last 3 years, they've increased the percentage of organic seed they are using. We also found that farmers are generally more satisfied with the organic seed they're using compared to our first analysis. About 3/4 of those who responded to our survey said that they have about the same seed quality issues with organic seed as they do with conventional untreated seed. And again, it was encouraging to see that this showed a minor improvement since our first report. Also encouraging is that the vast majority of farmers responding to our survey believe that organic seed is important to the integrity of organic production. And in fact, 85% of farmers who responded to our survey strongly believe that varieties bred for organic production are important to the overall success of organic agriculture. And this finding, again, differed from our first analysis and clearly demonstrated what we see as an improved understanding among organic farmers, that breeding crops in the environment of their intended use is important to not just their success, but that of the broader organic industry. I included this picture here just as an example of some successful organic plant breeding initiatives. Here are a couple OSA researchers in the field with University of Wisconsin-Madison plant breeder Bill Tracy, actually in a trial plot here in Montana where I am for an open pollinated sweet corn project, adapting these sweet corn genetics to organic production conditions and to the specific region and climate. Okay, moving along. This is one of the more exciting findings from our latest assessment, where we found that we've seen a tremendous increase in research investments, both in the public and private sectors. Investments in organic plant breeding and other organic seed research have increased by $22 million in the last 5 years alone. And in our first report, published in 2011, we documented a mere $9 million between 1996 and 2009, in fact, a mere $9 million being invested in this type of research. So this increase in investment is encouraging. At the same time, it still pales in comparison, of course, to research funding that's directed toward conventional agricultural interests. And we know that investments in organic research oftentimes benefit farmers who aren't certified organic, who aren't using organic production practices. The same can't always be true for the investments in conventional chemical-intensive research. Our report, again, gets into a lot more detail with some of this data, including how these research investments break down. I'll quickly share that more than 80% of the investments you're seeing here in this chart went toward organic plant breeding and variety trial projects. And then other areas of research that received high levels of funding include enterprise development and seed production research. When it comes to how research investments break down by region, we found in our most recent analysis that multi-regional projects, so these are projects that are highly collaborative, they cross state and region borders, they often include more than one institution. These multi-regional projects receive the most amount of funding, which was interesting because in our first report, multi-regional projects received the least amount of funding. So I think this also shows a shift in interest and understanding that multi-regional, multi-partner projects are highly successful and efficient with our research dollars. The Pacific Northwest ranks second in terms of research investments, followed by the Midwest and the Northeast, ranking fourth. Okay, moving along, what were the areas where we saw little to no progress? If you recall from a previous graph I showed, across crop types, only 27% of farmers report planting all organic seed. That means, of course, that more than 2/3 of organic crop growers responding to our survey rely on conventional untreated seed to some extent. Now, the reasons for not sourcing organic seed come as no surprise, and those reasons include specific varieties simply not being available in an organic form. Sometimes there's an insufficient quantity of seed for a particular organic variety. Organic varieties sometimes lack desirable traits. And price is still a factor. Even though price is not an allowable reason to source non-organic seed, it still was listed by a number of growers responding to our survey as a factor for not choosing organic seed. Though I will say that it was less of a factor in our second analysis compared to our first, published in 2011. Looking at the average percent acreage planted to organic seed, while we saw improvements in acreage planted to organic seed for most crop types, we did see a decrease in forage crop acreage planted to organic seed when comparing our 2011 and 2016 data. We found that we've also made very little progress, little to no progress really, in larger operations using organic seed. Our findings show that the largest operations still use relatively little organic seed, and this, of course, has a big impact on overall acreage in the U.S. planted to organic seed. If you look at this graph here, it shows that vegetable growers with 10 acres or less planted about 75% of their acreage on average to organic seed. But as acreage increases, organic seed usage goes down, and by the time we get to 480 acres or more, we see that on average, growers are only planting about 20% of their acreage to organic seed. Now, this clearly represents a challenge for sure, but we'd also like to view this as an opportunity to fill supply gaps, especially when it comes to seed quantity. But this is an example where it will take different stakeholders along the seed and food production chains working together to make more rapid progress in this area. For example, as some of you may know, larger operations often are growing under contract with a certified handler, with a certified organic processor. Sometimes those growing contracts dictate which variety needs to be grown, and too often that variety isn't available in an organic form. So that provides an opportunity for the organic community to have more coordination and communication to inform organic plant breeding goals and inform organic seed production decisions within the organic seed industry. Lastly, we found a significant change in farmers reporting that their certifier requested that they take extra steps to source more organic seed. We see here that only 40% of respondents said their certifier requested that they take greater steps to source organic seed, such as consulting more than 3 seed catalogs or conducting variety trials on their farm to see if they could identify an organic variety that performed as well, if not better, than a conventional variety that they already relied on. And this finding represented a significant decrease from our 2011 report, where you see here that more than 60% of farmers who responded that year said they had requested, that their certifier had requested that they make a greater effort to source organic seed. Now, this data is important. We're sharing this because we found in both 2011 and 2016, as you see here in figure 10, that growers indeed use more organic seed when certifiers encourage them to do so. We know the certification community plays an important role in working with operations and developing organic systems plan and overseeing the adherence to the organic rules, which is why in our most recent report, we made it a priority to gather meaningful feedback from the certification community. And I'm going to touch on just a few findings here to underscore the importance of the role that certifiers play in supporting organic seed usage. We had more than 20 accredited certifying agencies respond to this survey, and those 22 ACAs represent about 70% of operations. So the majority of operations in the country. The vast majority of them believe that organic seed is gaining market acceptance, which is a very positive finding, of course. But only 22% say that organic farmers they work with are making a greater effort to source organic seed. The majority of them say that they haven't done anything internally to strengthen policies and procedures regarding organic seed, how they monitor organic seed usage internally. And more than half of them agreed that trainings for the certification community would be useful, not just to better understand how to interpret and enforce the organic seed requirement, but to also better understand the nuances of organic seed availability issues. And the vast majority of ACAs responding agree that additional educational materials for farmers would also be helpful, would also help increase organic seed sourcing from having more reliable and timely organic seed databases, such as the Organic Seed Finder database, as well as having resources available that instruct growers on how to conduct variety trials on their farm. Finally, we found through this survey that there were mixed reviews of the National Organic Program's 2013 Organic Seed Guidance document, which aims to clarify the organic seed requirement for the certification community and provide additional guidance on how best to enforce it in a reasonable and consistent way. So where do we go from here? Our report includes 35 recommendations in the areas of organic plant breeding and other research needs, recommendations for improving the organic seed supply chain, and policy recommendations as well, which is what I want to focus on now. Policy work is essential to building and protecting organic seed systems, though we don't often think of the importance of that type of policy advocacy work in the work we do, whether we're a seed company, a seed grower, a food company. Laws and regulations impact each part of an organic seed system, from how much public funding is directed toward organic plant breeding to policies that aim to keep excluded methods such as genetically engineered traits out of organic seed. And so it's imperative that as an organic seed community, we engage in advocacy to advance these and other policy priorities. I want to give you a quick snapshot of some of the challenges and recommendations that are listed in our report, and then I'm going to share a couple of timely opportunities that you all can engage in to help us advance shared policy priorities. First of all, as I mentioned just a moment ago, I mentioned there was mixed reactions to the National Organic Program guidance document that was published in 2013. Organic Seed Alliance and others in the advocacy community agree that there could be more guidance, more clear guidance and stronger guidance for the certification and inspection community around the organic seed requirement. And I'm going to touch on this further in a minute here. There also remains funding and infrastructure constraints for research, especially our public research institutions, which serve as valuable research institutions to respond to especially the regional needs of farmers, as well as underserved markets such as organic. The seed companies that currently dominate the industry have no genuine interest in the success of organic agriculture, and yet interest among our public institutions, among new graduate students and university professionals is only growing in the area of organic plant breeding and other organic seed research, but we need to make sure that they have the resources they need to advance the most important research priorities. And I'm going to return to this opportunity here in a minute in the context of the Farm Bill. We also need more organic seed producers, which is one of the reasons why we and our partners continue to host these 6-part webinar series in order to support existing as well as new seed producers who are interested in growing seed organically, both in the field and through virtual instruction and updates like these webinars. Lastly, there remains a few different burdens and barriers to making faster progress in the area of organic seed innovation. One of these barriers is that the burden to protect the integrity of organic seed from, again, excluded methods such as genetically engineered traits, that burden remains on the shoulders of the organic community, which presents an opportunity to advocate for stronger regulations of genetically engineered crops and reasonable policy approaches from an organic standpoint as well. Intellectual property rights issues also can serve at times as a barrier to slowing or restricting areas of research that would help to advance organic seed. Organic Seed Alliance advocates for appropriate intellectual property rights models that do not restrict a farmer's right to say seed, and that ensures that seed is managed carefully, that our plant genetic resource base is managed carefully and as a public common good, so that researchers especially continue to have access to the plant genetic resources they need to be able to respond again to the seed needs of farmers and to be able to advance organic seed research. There are many other challenges and recommendations outlined in our report. I'm going to leave it there and turn now to some of the opportunities that you all can support in the coming weeks and months. First of all, next week, the National Organic Standards Board is meeting for their fall meeting in Jacksonville, Florida. And on the agenda are a few different seed-related proposals. The first proposal focuses on strengthening the organic seed guidance document, as I've already mentioned a couple of times. In addition to strengthening the organic seed guidance document, they also proposed that the National Organic Program incorporate a regulatory update for the first time to the seed requirement. It would ask that certified growers demonstrate improvement in sourcing organic seed year to year, leaving a lot of flexibility for certifiers to measure that improvement as they see fit. We believe this is a reasonable step forward to signal to the organic community that organic seed is an integral part of organic integrity, and that further sourcing and investments in organic seed will lead to a more robust organic seed supply. There are a number of other recommendations that we'll be providing at the National Organic Standards Board meeting next week. Also on the topic of the organic seed guidance, we'll be encouraging the NOSB to identify opportunities for more certifier trainings in the context of organic seed. We'd also like to see some type of comprehensive review of organic seed availability so we can better understand supply gaps and ongoing needs. We'd also like to see support for organic seed databases like the Organic Seed Finder website that I mentioned earlier, so that again, we have more of a one-stop shop for finding organic seed, as well as I mentioned a minute ago, identifying gaps in the supply. This would help to inform plant breeding decisions as well as production decisions within the organic seed trade. In addition to the organic seed guidance document and regulatory proposal, there will also be a proposal aimed at clarifying which methods used in the development of seed should or shouldn't be excluded. There will also be a discussion document focused on seed purity and whether it is appropriate to adopt a threshold for organic seed, a threshold for genetically engineered material in seed used by organic operations. We at OSA continue to believe that we have a lot more questions to answer before we can determine if and how a seed purity standard would be feasible. But these three topics, the organic seed guidance document, excluded methods proposal, and seed purity discussion document, are three very timely organic seed policy discussions happening within the National Organic Standards Board, as well as the broader organic community. I want to remind everyone that 2018 is a Farm Bill year, and there are a couple opportunities here to advance organic seed policy as well. The first is the Organic Agriculture Research Act. This has been introduced in the House, not yet in the Senate. And in the House, it already has more than 20 co-sponsors. It has a lot of momentum, a lot of interest from both sides of the aisle, and we are very hopeful that this act will be included as part of the larger Farm Bill. What it does is it aims to double the amount of funding for the U.S. Department of Ag's flagship organic research program, and that's the Organic Research and Extension Initiative program that funds most of the cutting-edge organic research that goes on here in the United States. And by doubling that pool of money for organic research, a lot of which goes toward organic plant breeding and other seed research priorities, we believe that we can make greater strides in, again, the cutting-edge field of organic plant breeding and helping to fill some of the supply gaps in the area of organic seed. Secondly, we and our policy partners are going to be advocating for more public plant breeding funding generally, specifically for projects that have the end goal of releasing farmer-ready varieties. We have seen, unfortunately, a decline in public support for our land-grant university breeding programs, and we really need to remedy that. We need to ensure that our public research institutions have the resources and infrastructure they need to be as responsive as possible, especially in the context of changing climates and other challenges that farmers face in the way of production, that they have the resources they need to be as responsive and productive as possible in the way of delivering public cultivars to farmers across the country. I want to encourage everyone on this call to stay up to speed on these policy developments. We are members of the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition as well as the National Organic Coalition. Both have regular email updates that they send out with ways that you can get involved, either by encouraging you to contact your members of Congress or to educate, perhaps if you work for a nonprofit or a farm, to educate your colleagues and constituents. And we are going to need as many people as possible showing up in this next Farm Bill to advocate for these and other policy priorities that advance organic seed as well as organic agriculture broadly. OSA 2 delivers quarterly newsletters as well as timely policy actions that you can opt into or out of. Go to seedalliance.org and you can sign up for our newsletter there. You can also follow us on social media through Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where we provide almost daily updates on our research and education as well as policy work. Lastly, I just want to make a plug for our Organic Seed Growers Conference that's happening in a few months in Corvallis, Oregon, where we will have an entire track at this conference focused on policy advocacy on some of the issues that I talked about today and many others as well. And with that, I want to open it up for questions. We have plenty of time, and I'm listing my email address here as well if people want to get in touch with me directly to learn more about any of the topics I covered today or to ask other questions.
Unmuted.
Okay, thank you so much, Kiki. We did end a little bit early, so we have plenty of time for questions. One question is, how can the larger companies, or have they already, like the chemical companies that own some large seed companies, get on board regarding organic seed production? Are many of them already producing organic seeds?
The companies that's a good question. Thank you for that question. The companies that, the largest seed and agrochemical companies are not involved in organic seed specifically. they may be connected to the organic seed community in the way of licensing, say, untreated lines, genetic lines, to independent seed companies that do produce seed organically, and sell to an organic farmer customer base. But they currently, again, as I mentioned, don't appear to have an interest in organic seed specifically. Of course, some of these companies sell conventional untreated seed. My understanding with some crops, at least, that too often that seed is not available in an untreated form. So did that answer the question?
I'm not sure, but yeah, feel free to clarify if you want to there. But yeah, thank you. If you have any further thoughts about that question, feel free to type it into the question box here. Yep, okay, said thank you, so that's good. Preservation of ancient seed stocks for future generations that are free of genetic manipulation. I guess someone is wondering about whether that is going on.
Preservation of seed stocks of heritage varieties, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think that's what he means.
Of course, the issue of contamination where unwanted genetically engineered material is showing up in varieties where, again, it wasn't intended, it's not wanted. It, of course, is an ongoing issue, and one that we still have a lot to learn about in terms of the extent of the problem. Understanding the extent of the problem, even just in one crop type like corn, is going to help inform this discussion, especially in the way of policy and how to address it in a way that doesn't have unintended consequences, if you will. But of course, it's only a problem right now for crops that have a genetically engineered counterpart. It's more of a problem, of course, for crops that are more promiscuous, like corn, alfalfa, open pollinating crops. I'm not aware of any analysis of contamination levels of particular seed stocks, and specific to your question, I think. Again, I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but there are resources out there for helping to understand, to test for and understand the problem of contamination. And I'd be happy to follow up with you if you want to shoot me an email afterward.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this person is asking about one of your figures. It says, while the overall trend until 2012 was positive, it looks as though the funding has been flat from 2012 to 2014. Is that, and is there clarification around the comment for data from 2015, 16, and 17? We can go back there if you want to. It's figure 2.
That's okay. I can see it. So the values after 2014 are, at the time, were currently committed funds. So those bars are going to be much higher. We, at the time of the analysis, we were doing this in 2014 and 2015. We just didn't have all the final numbers for existing as well as perhaps newer projects that had been funded in these areas. I hope that makes sense, but we do, because the analysis was taking place at that time, 2014 and 2015, that's why they flattened out, because we didn't have all the projected numbers for the next few years. As I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, we're committed to conducting this analysis every 5 years so that we can measure the progress. And so in our next report in a few years now, you will certainly see those bars representing higher numbers.
Okay, great. Thank you. I also wanted to mention that if you're interested in learning about some of the multi-state research projects that are going on in organic seed production, on eOrganic.info, if you go there, it's just http/eorganic.info. we actually have some websites for some of those projects, like the Novik project. There's a carrot breeding project, there's a corn breeding project, and a tomato breeding project that both we, eOrganic, and the Organic Seed Alliance are collaborators on. And you can go to those websites, the eorganic.info, and find some websites with descriptions of those projects in case you'd like to learn more about those. I'll type that into the chat box in just a moment when we have the next question going, just in case you are interested. How can we be sure that there will not be any cross-contamination by GMOs if they're already so widespread?
Well, we can't be sure. That's the problem. Their contamination exists. And through our surveys with organic seed companies that are selling crops at risk of contamination, we have found that all of these companies are monitoring the problem. They are spending a lot of money testing their organic seed lots to identify if there's contamination. And if there's contamination over their own internal threshold level, they direct those certified organic seed lots to the conventional non-organic seed marketplace. And they take a huge financial hit, not because someone's telling them they have to do that, but because they genuinely care about the integrity of organic and they want to meet the expectations of their customers, which is not to have genetically engineered material in the seed they're purchasing. And so, again, I share this to say that seed companies committed to the organic seed market and to their organic customer base are monitoring the problem and are taking action when contamination is found. But it is a pervasive problem. And as I mentioned, unfortunately, there's no real shared responsibility at this time in preventing the problem and dealing with the problem when it is identified, meaning there's no regulatory requirement for people who grow genetically engineered crops or the manufacturers of genetically engineered crops to plant a buffer area or try to mitigate the spread of genetically engineered pollen in other ways. Currently, that is solely on the shoulders of growers who want to, and in fact may need to, avoid contamination. And then when contamination is found, farmers have found themselves in situations where they lose, that contract with a company. They lose money because they were unsuccessful, despite their best efforts, in preventing contamination. And we believe strongly that there needs to be shared responsibility. We also strongly believe that those who promote and profit from the technology should be held liable for damages incurred by the spread of genetically engineered products. We believe that's the only fair approach, and currently there's no compensation mechanism available to organic or other non-GMO growers when contamination problems arise.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Do you envision a stair-step set of requirements whereby those that have a strong set of organic seeds available have more stringent requirements to use them versus other weaker seed resource types having a reduced requirement to source them organically?
Can you repeat that one time, Alice?
Yeah. It took me a couple times to read it here, but it's a good question. Do you envision a stair-step set of requirements whereby those that have a strong set of organic seeds available have more stringent requirements to use them versus other weaker seed resource types having a reduced requirement to source them organically? Did you get it that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I understand that to be different, perhaps levels of pressure or expectations on certified organic operations who have more diverse options in terms of organic seed availability versus growers of particular crops or in particular regions who might not have as many adequate organic seed choices. So that's how I'm interpreting the question. I hope that's right. And I do think that should be the case in the way of having a reasonable, we want to promote reasonable and measurable improvements in organic seed sourcing. So first of all, we think it's appropriate for operations that aren't making a genuine effort to source more or to take additional measures such as conducting variety trials from time to time to potentially identify a good organic variety, that those operations should be the ones that are encouraged most to make an extra effort. And we also believe that certifiers currently are doing a good job of doing their best to understand the reality on the ground, including operations that are located in areas where there might not be a lot of organic seed options. So yes, the proposal in front of the NOSB right now, we believe balances the complexity of these seed issues and balances the regulatory requirement proposal with the reality on the ground, meaning it leaves enough flexibility for certifiers to enforce that measured improvement as they see fit. So I think the answer to your question is yes.
Okay. Can you comment on the appearance of utility patented, open pollinated, certified organic seed in our nation's seed catalogs that prevent farmers from saving their own seed for the first time?
Comment on it, just comment on, say it one more time, please, Ella.
Yeah, the appearance of utility patented, open pollinated, certified organic seed in our seed catalogs that prevent farmers from saving their own seed for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have our own policy at OSA of not supporting utility patents on seed, but it is becoming more pervasive in the seed trade and including in the organic seed world. I should make clear that just because there's a utility patent on a variety doesn't necessarily mean that it's enforced in a particular way, including restricting a farmer's right to save seed, although oftentimes that is the case. My first comment is to encourage growers, if they have questions about varieties they're looking at in the catalog, including about any potential intellectual property rights restrictions, please contact your seed company. Please let them know that these questions are burning for you, that you have concerns about how certain IPRs might be enforced and affect you as a grower. Seed companies want to hear from their customers on these and other issues. So I encourage anyone who sees language around intellectual property rights associated with a variety, especially varieties that they like or want to use or purchase, communicate those concerns, communicate those questions. That's the only way that companies are going to better understand what the concerns are and expectations of their customer base.
Okay. This question isn't directly about seed policy, but maybe you can help the asker find out where you can find out more information. How much interest is there in winter rye seed, and how clean from weed seed would be required?
Yes, that is not my wheelhouse. I'm sorry. I'd be happy to put whomever asked that question in touch with the right people if you want to send me an email.
Okay, let me put her email back on the screen here. I know that there would be people at the eOrganic Seed Alliance who might be able to help with that question.
Yeah, I could definitely field it through our research and education team.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a long question, so I'll try to read it clearly and slowly here. Kiki, follow up from the first question. Can you talk a little bit more about private sector investments, and particular what incentives are needed for the production of organic seed for varieties not available and the breeding and grow out of organic seed? So that's the first part of this question. I'll just leave it at that for now.
Okay. So share more about private sector investments. Our analysis doesn't include an assessment of how much private seed companies are putting toward organic plant breeding and organic seed production. We don't have access to that kind of data, but we do have, our analysis does include private foundations and companies that have been very public about investing in organic seed research and organic seed production. For example, private foundations like the Quick Bar Family Foundation has invested over $1 million in organic breeding and other organic seed research and initiatives. I'm trying to think of a few others off the top of my head. In terms of incentives, I mentioned the example of having more coordination and communication between contracted growers and the processors and handlers they're growing for, as well as the certification community. We need to create those feedback loops. We need to include organic seed production companies. And in terms of incentive, I think we have yet to find some good solutions, but I think we need to have some more creative incentives as well so that we can move the dial forward in a more meaningful way, especially when it comes to larger operations. But the one challenge we face in executing this roadmap of recommendations and the State of Organic Seed Report is that we need to move these recommendations forward simultaneously. And we need, as I mentioned before, a lot of different stakeholders on board all at once in order to make an impact. The certification community, the food processing community, organic food companies, organic seed growers, organic farmers. We need everyone on board and committed to making more progress in the way of organic seed so that we can be reporting on more progress 5 years from now. So it's probably an unsatisfying answer in terms of the incentives. But we are all ears if anyone on this call wants to engage in that dialogue and propose some ideas.
Okay. How can you address the question of how to get processors or distributors that require contract growers to produce using varieties not available organically to get the seed companies to produce those varieties organically?
Yeah, so again, it's about communication with those handlers and seed companies so that they can identify early on, a year or likely 18 months or more in advance, of what varieties they need in an organic form. And with a commitment and perhaps a contract to grow that seed organically, that's the way to do it. And there have been examples where there's been some movement in that regard, where those conversations are happening well in advance, and organic seed companies can plan far enough in advance to ensure that the quantity is available for a certain organic variety to help those handlers access enough seed for their contracted growers. Was there another part of that question? Did I answer that fully?
I think so. There is another part of this question, but it's not. You answered that part of it. So we'll just move on here. Finally, and this is a pretty complex question here, how do we create viable public-private partnerships for breeding varieties suitable for organic conditions in the context of the current IPR regime and continued decrease in public sector funding and rising private share in plant breeding?
Yeah, well, it's a multi-pronged approach. I mean, first, as you just mentioned, Alice, and I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we have seen a troubling trend in decreased public resources going toward public plant breeding, and that's why a Farm Bill priority aims to advocate for not just more public plant breeding funding, but funding for classical plant breeding projects that result in finished varieties to help meet demand and to serve to some extent as competition or just more choice in the marketplace, given how highly consolidated the private trade is. There are examples of good public and private projects underway. Some of the eOrganic, some of the OREI, Organic Research and Extension Initiative projects demonstrate that, where a number of land-grant university partners are working with seed companies in the way of conducting variety trials and sharing research plots, sharing very openly data and germplasm as well. The open access and shared benefit, that is a priority within a lot of these OREI participatory plant breeding projects. And so there are good examples, and I'm happy to follow up with anyone with specific examples in the way public and private. The intellectual property rights question, breeders who I communicate with as part of these projects, they're getting, IPR isn't always a barrier to innovation. I think it's important to keep it in perspective. And when it does, some of these research partners are communicating those current concerns to their university partners and getting around it by coming up with internal creative solutions in the way of agreements for sharing germplasm, for example, institution to institution. And so increasingly what I'm seeing, especially in the organic community, especially in the organic research community, is this commitment to open access, sharing material, sharing data, and keeping the product of those research investments in the public domain, meaning keeping it in, managing those finished varieties in a way that doesn't put any restrictions on farmers in the way of seed saving or on-farm plant breeding and research, and leaving open access for other research so that they can improve upon those varieties even further, so that we are not locking up plant genetic resources and we're not slowing innovation.
The slide again about where you can find the recording of all the webinars in this series, as well as on last year's series. I know that this webinar was initially going to also include seed contracting and economics, but that seemed like a little bit too much to put in one webinar. So we do have a recording of a webinar that was done last year on that topic, which you can find in our webinar archive and on the eOrganic YouTube channel. And thank you, Kiki, for this informative presentation. And thanks to all of you for joining us, and we look forward to having you on future webinars.